And welcome to the Not Your Mother's podcast, yet another podcast that you're listening to. I know podcasts are all the rage right now, but we don't care. We want to try one. My name is Nick Sescon, and I'm here with Brandon Tucker. How's it going, Brandon?
Good. Just to give the audience here a little bit of explanation about what this is going to be. Basically, as the name suggests, we're not two normal guys talking about normal things using normal words. We are a geek and a super geek. I'll let you figure out who's who as it progresses. And we're talking about not always about geeky stuff, but
oh crap, that's gonna be a hard episode.
But I'll be honest with you, it'll probably be mostly geeky stuff. Using quite a bit of geeky words and a lot of swears coming from me. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah, fucking ain't right.
There we go. We thought we'd start it off this podcast with talking about horror. We're going to do a little bit of a 3-episode, we think, horror series. And we decided we start with Metro games.
Yeah, so when we say horror, we're talking about like PC console video games today, right? So first in the series is the Metro series, which for those of you, if you don't know, it's actually based off of a book called Metro 2033. Why don't you give us a synopsis? You're the one that played it.
Yeah. So basically, a quick rundown of what you're expecting here. Obviously, we should clarify this, but it should be obvious. There's going to be some spoilers throughout here. Metro 2033 isn't new, though, so it shouldn't be a big deal.
We're also not sponsored by anybody about, selling their product. Yet.
I mean, you want to holler at us. We're all good with that. But, yeah, so basically what happens is it's set in Russia. All the characters are either Russian or Nazis. And, yeah. And basically you're in a post-apocalyptic... Oh, I can't say that word. Yeah, that's great.
The after time with the world destruction. So
we're off to a good start.
A post-apocalyptic setting set in the subways of Russia. It's in Moscow?
It takes place in Moscow and a bit of the surrounding area,
yeah. And one of the things I really like about the game, so Brandon has played through 2 of them. I've only played through half the first one. Right off the bat, it's interesting because it's a different feeling not being in a normal setting. Because it's set in Russia, that means that English isn't the first language there, and things they feel strange, they feel different, which is something that an old game called DayZ used to do, where they dropped a bunch of English people into like the side of a Polish countryside, I think. So you had no idea where you were, you couldn't read any of the road signs, and I found that kind of played through with Metro as well. Something that I kind of really enjoyed about it.
Oh yeah, definitely. To come across here a bit, maybe even a bit ignorant, because I'll win the audience over right away. How it was being set in Russia like that. Obviously all the characters Russian have Russian names. Specifically with the first one, I found that for some reason, throughout the game, every time someone would swear, or not every time, but like most of the time someone would swear, they swore in Russian, which I thought was amusing, but I had subtitles on so I could understand it. But I thought that was an interesting tactic. But what I was going to originally say is that since it's set in Russia, I honestly had a hard time telling a lot of the characters apart because they all look the same and had Russian names that I couldn't differentiate too
there's
easily.
The ignorance.
Right? There it is. There's the small town Albertan coming out in me.
No, I think that also comes from a point because the Metro games are not new. Because I think I played... when I played Metro 2033, it was when it first came out. Not the remastered one, and I know they've announced more. But that would have been probably 7 to 10 years ago. I'd have to look that up. That's probably not right. But if you want to look it up, then go ahead. Podcast Plus.
Yeah.
So because of that, the models are obviously going to look the same because that would have been on the Unreal 2 engine, which is like what Half-Life 2 was made after, and what most people think indie games are made with, that kind of look, that it's the same engine. So it would make sense that they look the same too.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the horror of the game.
Okay.
What made you scared? What worked for you with that game? Why did you find it interesting? Why did you want to play a second game of it from a horror point of view?
Well, to be frank about why I wanted to play the second one, to be honest with you, I bought it as a bundle, so I didn't really have much of a choice.
Oh, fair.
But that's not to say that I didn't want to play the second one, because I did. What got me, though, about it was the immersiveness of it, and I think this was because it was based off a book. And I haven't read the books, so I don't know what the books are like. I imagine they're much better than the games, just like books are always much better than the movies.
Yeah.
But I thought that it was cool. I don't know if this was exactly, they took this from the book or if they just did this with the game, but it made it immersive because your character never spoke a single word of dialogue in the entire game. It kind of made some of the scenes a little bit, I don't know, rough, because there wasn't a back and forth with your character. It was just like they were understanding what you were saying without you saying a word, kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Or other characters would say stuff for you. But
so you found that language really played into the horror?
It did. It made you feel like you were part of it more, because there wasn't this foreign voice speaking words for you. It was you're the person and you're not saying anything, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It just got me a little bit.
Actually, yeah, not to derail this completely, but that was Grand Theft Auto. That was the reason that they used to do that. Like when Grand Theft Auto 3 came out on the original Xbox, the main protagonist that you played didn't have language, I think, for that one. Yeah, because it was Vice City that they made. Yeah, anyway, sorry. The end of the story is that they actually went to court because too many people were complaining that if you have that much immersion into this criminal character, you're breeding criminals out of our children. And so then they had to go in and start making more immersive narratives in the Grand Theft Auto games with Vice City, of making the protagonist have a voice, which led to what we have now, which I love, GTA 5.
Oh, God, yeah.
It'll be another 10 years before that game stops making money and they decide to make GTA 6.
Yeah. It'll also be another 10 years before they figure out how to fucking make loading screens that are 30 minutes long. Jesus.
Yeah. Okay. Plays interesting. So one thing I want to talk about, we'll probably touch on this in every episode, just to refresh, but when we're talking about horror, one of the main principles in horror in our kind of generation is Stephen King came out in the last 10 or 15 years, I can't remember when, and he started talking about his 3 principles of horror. And he says that there are 3 different real types of horror, where there is, he calls them terror, horror, and revulsion. And so the differences between them, revulsion is really easy if you think of anything shock gore, like the remade Evil Dead.
Yeah, loved that.
Yeah,
loved
right?
that,
Or Hostel, or House of a Thousand Corpses.
Oh.
The horror, you shudder, and your brain does that immediately because of the gore and the brutality of it.
Yeah.
So that would be revulsion. And we're going to touch on that in further series because I know the games that we're talking about.
Yeah.
The other ones, so terror is this overwhelming sense of fear, which is very famously done with H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu series and that kind of thing, right? Where these people are seeing these creatures, these old gods from another world that are so immense that it breaks their minds and they go completely nuts just by viewing this creature. And the horror within that, that sense of fear, that supernatural sense of fear, is called terror. And then the final one is more of your 80s slasher film. Guys in the house with a knife about to kill you, and that sense of suspense. And he calls that horror. I think he calls that horror. We're going to look that up for the next episode. But for now, we're calling it horror.
And if we said it on the internet, it's obviously true.
Yes, exactly. Especially in a podcast.
Exactly.
These are Bible of the internet.
Exactly. That's so funny that you would bring that up, actually, because I'm not even joking. Like a couple days ago, one of my former classmates asked for opinions about horror for an essay she was writing.
Good.
And
I'm glad you're bringing this story in because she'll probably be one of the 3 people that listen to this podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. Little wink, wink there. Yeah. And I actually had to go do some digging into what distinguishes a thriller from a horror. Yeah. And I mean, it's not something you can just find in black and white. Like, this is what makes this, because there's gray areas. There just is.
New podcast idea: the differences between genres in music.
I would. Oh my god, that's like a 10-part series for me.
Yeah. anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, and what I found actually a thing that kind of stuck with me was that horror, to be a horror, it has to have a sense of illogicness. It has to. That's not a word, but I made it a word. It has to be.
We're communications majors. We swear.
Not that you could tell. It has to be. Yeah, it has to be illogical. So either through the character's existence, through like, so it would be Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
His existence is illogical. That's not a thing.
Okay.
Like a creature that can travel through dreams and kill people.
Okay, so then Scream. Thriller or horror?
That would be a thriller, because, and I'll tell you why, the second part of why that's a thriller.
Sorry, this is another derail, but that's fine.
It is. We'll do a lot of derails.
Yeah.
This is a train like a fucking roller coaster. It just goes everywhere.
Enjoy the ride.
Yeah. It's because the second part of what can make it illogical is not the character's existence, but their motivation. And so for Scream, if I remember it correctly, it's been a while since I've seen it, his motivation makes sense. It does make sense.
It's slightly illogical though too. Like
I don't remember them super well, so I might be wrong.
So his motivation was based off of horror movie tropes.
Okay.
And he was killing people because of that. So there is the sense of illogicalness to that as well.
TM.
Yeah. No, I like that though. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And so yeah, I thought that Metro is horror automatically because, and I honestly feel like a lot of video games kind of are, because all video games are logical. That's why they're video games. Unless you're talking like Sims or something, like even going back to ones. Yeah, exactly. Even going back to Grand Theft Auto, that's an illogical world. That world doesn't really make sense.
The police are terrible.
Exactly.
If you bump a car, they kill you. Yeah. They no longer take you to jail. In early GTA games, you would either get busted or wasted. Yeah. They got rid of busted.
Oh they just shoot to kill now.
And this is a topic for another podcast, but I'm wondering if that is a social statement by the developers about the current. Anyway, I'll let people listen between the lines on that one. But going back to Metro, then, if we use my 3 examples of horror, where do you think it fits?
It's not gory. It's really not. Like, I played the games. It's not gory.
No, it's a shooter. I'll say it's a first-person shooter.
It is, yeah.
It doesn't feel like, it's not like a Doom, but it's also not like a Deus Ex.
No,
right?
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
It's got a good narrative, and it feels a little more like a BioShock in that you're
absolutely
traveling around.
Does. Yes. Yeah.
Traveling around with this narrative, but you're right. There isn't any explicit gore besides shooting people.
Yeah, you'll get blood on your mask and you have to wipe it off, but like that in today's day and age, that's nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, please listen to episode 2 and 3 of our podcast if you want to hear about revulsion.
Oh God, yeah, we'll get there. Trust us.
Yeah. So then, terror.
See, it wasn't so much like playing Metro. It wasn't so much. A lot of games will have like you'll see when we get to our further episodes in the horror series, but it wasn't so much like there wasn't jump scares. There wasn't any of those really. Like there was a handful in the entire 2 games. Yeah. It was just like you were always in a sense of, is something going to get me right now? Like that's what made it horror, is that you were always on the edge of your seat. Like there could be something right around this corner.
And it was some of the narrative situations from the small bit that I played that I remember is like you're in the subway systems, and usually subway stations are like the towns in the world, right? And when you're traveling from one town to another, you find the guards from the second town that you have to get past, and you either sneak around or you kill them, but you're not supposed to be in the second town. And so as you're going through this other town, there's this whole impending feeling of, am I going to get found out? Am I going to
Yeah.
get found out? Am I going to get tossed aside? Am I going to get shot because of this? And you've got to push the narrative by going through this town. But even the fact that you're not supposed to be there, that it kind of pushes that horror through the atmosphere of narrative more than anything else, which is something that I found is kind of unique. Because when you look at indie horror games, Amnesia did it well, and because they did everything well, because that's a crown jewel in indie horrors.
Yeah.
But generally, they don't have any kind of narrative. They rely either on atmospheric horror with sound, music, visuals, or they rely on jump scares. This game doesn't really rely on either of those.
No, it doesn't. I will comment though that it's funny about what you're saying about like sneaking through town. It's like, am I gonna get caught right now? Because those moments where you're supposed to be sneaking, those are some of the scariest moments in those games for me. When it seems like it should be counterintuitive, but when shit hit the fan and there were bullets flying everywhere, I actually felt calmer. I wasn't as scared because I knew what I was supposed to be doing and I was just kicking ass. But when I'm sneaking, you can't kick ass. You're just hoping you don't get caught. And it's just this terrifying fear.
And one thing that I love in a lot of old stealth games, there are your heads up display, there are indicators. You have like your sound pressure levels, you have where enemies are on the mini map, you have how aware other people are of you. In Metro, you have your goggles, you have no HUD, and you have no way to tell if people can see you or not. So I found sneaking was difficult that way because it is very much like I'm just hiding behind this barrel and I'm hoping he goes away.
It very much is, yeah. Yeah, almost the only thing you have to even indicate that you might be seen is there's a little blue light on your watch
Oh, yeah.
that will light up when you're invisible.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, not when you're visible, but when you're in the light. Um, but that's not that. Yeah, you said that's not that much help though.
No.
And what would happen that made it so much worse for me? And they obviously did this on purpose to increase the horror element to it, but it just scared the shit out of me unnecessarily because I don't know if it was. It definitely wasn't random. There was definitely something driving this. I don't know if it was every time you stepped into the light though, but like especially in the second game, like every 15 seconds of sneaking, the music would just get dramatic as all hell and it would just spike up and then go right back down again and your heart would just do that exact same thing. You'd be like, oh shit, what's about to happen?
So yes, that is something that I like to call the anticipated horror. That you can use your atmosphere around. And again, I touched on how indie games do that a lot, where you can from a game developer's point of view, you can kind of guide your players in how they are expected to feel and how they are expected to act based off of other kinds of cues like music. Another really common one that isn't to do with horror is you ever get to that point in a video game and you're like, man, there is a lot of health and ammo around here. And you immediately clue in of, oh, I'm going to fight a boss soon.
Yeah.
That horror games, good developers of horror games know how to use that exact cue. So even if nothing is about to happen, if there's a red herring or something, if they have established in the game, like the music picks up, something's going to happen, all they have to do to scare you after that is pick up the music.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's true. Um, Funny thing is though, when you mentioned that like health and a lot of ammo lying around, that's actually not used a whole lot in Metro, which is the weird thing. They because I'm used to that where there's a lot of health and ammo, so you expect something.
Except
in Metro,
you're in a post-apocalyptic world.
Yeah, exactly. So already, I should clarify. When I played it, I played on the Ranger Hardcore mode, so ammo was especially rare. So I don't know if it was like a lot more common if you played on a lower level. It would obviously be a little more common. I don't know.
A little more, but they needed to get through the idea that you're in this post-apocalyptic world, so everybody is living on rags and the dregs of everything, right? So ammunition and that kind of stuff, that is a hot commodity that has a lot of power behind it.
Yeah.
And yeah, they wanted to push that, and that is why that there is not a lot in there.
Exactly. Like you'll go through it if you go through an entire building, they'll be like, okay, you just went through this entire building with 10 rooms. There was a health pack in 2 of the rooms. Oh, you missed it? That's too bad because now we're throwing you in with the giant boss and you only have 1 health pack on you.
Yeah.
That frequently happens.
Yeah. Another theme in Metro. I purposefully chose not to talk about this until the 20-minute mark because this is something that in games that you do properly will also happen later on in the game. We're talking about Metro a lot, and the one thing we haven't talked about are the enemies. Because we're talking about post-apocalyptic. I've mentioned that you have to fight other humans.
Yeah.
But it's a horror game with a monster, right?
It is.
There are monsters.
There are a lot
in
of
it.
monsters, yes.
And to do monsters properly, you'll see this in Alien Isolation from a AAA horror standpoint. You see it in Amnesia from an indie horror standpoint, but you'll see it in movies as well. Pick any kind of good horror movie. One thing that you'll notice, we'll say Alien. I'll go
I
with
was
that
thinking
one.
Alien or Predator, yeah.
Right? Predator. Perfect. Okay? What they need to do is they have to build up this idea. This is the terror that I'm talking about. They're building up the idea of this horrifying creature. So you don't see it right away. They usually they show that it's got acid for blood. They show that it can kill very quickly. They show this, they show that, but they don't do the full reveal until there's a certain point where this horror is at this climax, where they're waiting. This anticipation has built and built and built, and then you see the thing, and then it puts a face to all that horror and makes it even more so. One thing that I remember about the Metro games is the introduction, where you're being beset upon by all these creatures that are coming through the vents that you're protecting your town against, but they don't really show any of them.
No, that's true. You'll hear, and they kept this throughout the first and second game, is that just as often as you see monsters, you'll hear them, but you won't see them.
Yeah.
So you'll hear roars in the distance, or in the case of the second game where they introduce a lot of bigger monsters, it'll feel like you're in Jurassic Park and you'll actually feel vibrations and hear roars in the distance, but you can't see them.
And because they go back and forth with that, right? Like it doesn't build as a crescendo, then it shows a monster, then you're fighting the monster the whole time. That is something from a movie where they only have to do it for 2 hours. But if you're talking about a different medium being a video game, that means that they've got to entertain you for 20 to 60 hours on average for like a narrative horror game. So I can totally see especially if monsters in horror games have cues. So if this type of monster has a vibration, then at first you only see the vibration, and the fear is, what the hell's making the vibration? You meet the monster, you deal with it, and it will probably come back. Very famously done in Resident Evil 3 with, oh my god, the main bad guy. Stars! I can't remember his name. Anyway.
I have no idea.
Yeah, anyway, so, like, if you made a Jurassic Park video game, let me do it like that, and you had a cup of water that your character was taking throughout the whole game, right? The first time that the vibration started to plink plink on that cup of water, you'd be like, what the hell? And then the T-Rex attacks, and you're like, oh god, it's a T-Rex! And then you run from it. And then, say, 2 hours later in the video game, that cup starts vibrating again.
Yeah.
The horror is no longer what the hell is that. The horror is now the impending feeling of where the hell is the T-Rex and how the fuck am I going to get out of this situation?
Oh, I can't tell you, in bringing that to Metro, I can't tell you how many times I hear a roar and I'm like low on ammo, low on health, and I just start panicking and just looking in circles at where the hell is this thing coming from, because I need to figure it out and get ready to run. And one of the things that Metro didn't, the second game dropped the ball a little bit on this. I think the first game was pretty good though for it, was that there was never a time you were safe. I should clarify. When you're fighting the monsters, you're never safe. The humans, obviously, you kill them, they're dead. You can, but when you're fighting the monsters, there's not a whole lot of times. There's a few, but not a whole lot of times where you can kill a bunch of monsters, run out of the room, into the next room, you see more monsters, and then run back into the room, and nothing will be there, and you're safe. That rarely ever happens. If you run back in that room, monsters are still waiting for you in there. So you're never safe. You're always in a state of panicking and killing.
Yeah, keeping you on that suspenseful edge.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting. A lot of people have written books on this kind of crap. I have not been one of those people. But when you're talking about the horror in different mediums, like if you look at comic books too, comic books is something that we're going to talk about in later series. But you can have some really great horror comic books. And actually one of them, I was at a recent panel for like horror comic books, and the one that came up that you would totally appreciate was the Archie
Afterlife with Archie.
Afterlife.
I fucking love that series.
And it's great horror. And one of the things, so we're talking about how the differences in the mediums, right? In movies, you wait to build up. Then you have the monster. Then it's this like adrenaline-fused fight with the monster for the whole time. In video games, you kind of have to do a lull, then go into it, then lull, then go into it, just to keep them with that. In comic books, specifically in Archie Afterlife, one thing that they used really well was color.
Yes, yeah, that is very true. Yeah.
When things were nice and calm, they had cool tones. They had greens and blues, and if something was wrong, it would usually be highlighted with a warmer color, a red or a yellow.
If orange ever appeared in the comic, that means shit was getting real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And I found it very interesting. So, if you guys haven't yet, you can usually find it on a Steam sale for 80 to 90% off. I highly suggest you check out the Metro series, because those developers definitely knew what they were doing in making, in taking something that was horrific with these books. And we can talk about book horror as well, because that is also a different type of horror. Mm-hmm. I have been scared shitless by like 3 books in my life, but it can happen.
It can happen. Interesting enough, I will counter that by saying I've never been so scared by a book that I had to stop reading. That just doesn't get to me as good. But...
I got some suggestions.
Okay, we'll see.
That being said, they knew how to translate that book horror into video game horror. They did it really well. Yeah.
So I never, like I said, I don't know if the Metro games span one book or span multiple books. Like I don't know if
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I don't know if each game is one book.
I think there are actually 4 or 5 books.
Okay.
I'd have to look that up. I'm talking out of my ass.
These are some of my best conversations.
I have no accent, though.
I apologize to the audience that they were subjected to that.
It's like a 2-layered pun.
Oh, fuck me. One of the things, though, I will depart from the horror element of Metro and just comment on it as a game. Because we're getting close to the end of this episode anyways.
Yeah. Final thoughts.
Yeah. One of the things that I wasn't a big fan of the game is that it went from 0 to 100 real quick. That wasn't the part I didn't like. I love that. It almost right away started you on a rocket ship of freaking horror and excitement and action.
It hooked you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it kept you at that 100. It never dipped. It just was always at that 100 the entire game. But then towards the end of the games, for both games, it was like in the last 2 minutes of gameplay, it went from 100 and just shot right down to the floor. And the action just completely died, and the storyline was just cut short, and that was the end of the game. It felt like that for both games. It really disappointed me, actually.
Okay. That being said, if you're a fan of horror, I should ask you. You played them. Do you think it's still worth it for somebody to pick up?
I definitely do. Yeah, it's if you're depending on your skill level, I'll make this clear. I am not a great video game player. I am definitely one of the most average people you'll meet, and I'm assuming you are too, considering your handle is average gamer. So when we discuss video games, we're not pros.
Yeah, we're not speedrunning shit.
No.
We're not like in tournaments. We're not sponsored by anybody.
No, definitely not. So I will say that the Metro games won't give you a whole lot of time. Like I beat the first one in like 4 days, beat the second one in like a week. They're not long games, but they are excitement, and I would definitely recommend it.
I actually prefer games that aren't too long, but that's a different topic for a different game. Podcast. But anyway, thanks for joining us for this random crap.
Yes, hopefully you enjoyed this random crap, and you'll be back for more.
Yeah, 2 amateurs doing an amateur podcast. Who doesn't like a lot of that? And it's very unique on the internet nowadays.
Oh, you won't find anything like this anywhere.
Not ever. But anyway, thanks guys for joining us, and until next time, I guess we will play some fucking video games.
Yep.
Bye.